to our afternoon seminar session. We are so delighted that you're all joining us this afternoon. And the focus of our seminar today is Changing Climate, Changing World, Part 2. So if that is a seminar that you were tuning in for, you're definitely in the right place. My name is Lindsay, and I'm the new communications lead for the Baptist Union. So we're just so pleased that we're able to meet together over this weekend. Across Canopy Weekend, we have had a bit of a focus around climate change. And this morning we heard from Ruth Valerio from Tearfund, and our earlier seminar, we tuned into Martin Link, and he was exploring climate change, energy, and how churches can engage with this. So this afternoon, I am delighted to have Laura Young join us. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Lindsay. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Great. So, Laura, you are, let me get this right, the COP26 Advocacy and Events Coordinator with Tearfund.
Yes, that is correct.
Magic. And for those of you who don't know Laura or haven't come across her yet, she wears quite a number of hats. Some of you may know her as Less Waste Laura. She's got quite the following on social media, and hopefully some of you are joining us from there today. Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in fighting climate.
Yes, oh my goodness, what a big question. Well, I know loads of different hats, but they kind of all come together really nicely. But my academic background, that's probably quite a good place to start, is I did geography and environmental science at the University of Dundee. Whoop, whoop. And that was where I really began learning a lot about the planet and the world and really got a passion for it. I then went on to do a master's at the University of Edinburgh in environmental protection and management. So my kind of core background has always been environmental studies, climate change, a lot about waste, sustainability. But one of the things that I really felt was at university, you kind of learn all this stuff.
Yeah.
You don't ever then necessarily do anything about it. Obviously, you're going to go into a job, into a profession and take it with you. But I sort of felt like I was learning a lot about the planet, especially some of the things we've been hearing today about how, we're not being great to it. And I just really felt called as an individual to do something about it, to kind of live a little bit differently. So that kind of started my journey as this Less Waste Laura thing, kind of documenting it online and bringing people along with me. And that now spans into different spaces, I guess. So I do a lot of this, a lot of talking about it, a lot of, bringing my education to platforms for other people to learn. And obviously I work for Tearfund, and my job title is kind of a bit long and confusing, but it has that COP26 in it, which is, this big climate summit that we've been hearing a lot about. So, my job as well with Tearfund is to do with that, and in the lead up to that, which is actually happening this month now, so it technically starts at the end. So that's a bit frightening. But that's a wee bit of my kind of story to get in here.
Fantastic. Wow. What a background and what a journey you've been on to get to this point. You're also part of our public theology group. And I believe we've got some resources now available on our website that you've provided. Tell us a wee bit more about the public theology group and what that actually means. What's your involvement in it?
Yeah, so I am one of the members of the public theology group, and actually you will see some of the other members in a video I'm going to show later, so I'll leave that as a surprise to see some more faces, and they introduce themselves as well. But we've been meeting, I think it's historically been a thing, but I've been on since the beginning of this year, and it was a new group created at the beginning of the year, and we meet every month, give or take, a bit of summer holiday as well, and we discuss issues. That's probably not the most technical way of doing things, but we all come from different places and have different backgrounds, and we kind of discuss some of the things that we really felt was on the heart of the Baptist Union, of the church, of Christians, things that are topical to Scotland, things that are outside of Scotland as well. And we come together to kind of discuss issues. And I guess one of the really great things in a way was that climate change was one of the big things that we knew we wanted to talk about as a group. We knew that COP was coming up. It was something that a lot of us feel passionate about. And when you hear people talking, you'll hear that people come from different areas of expertise, but we all have this real passion for the environment and creation. And so we've been discussing that throughout the year in various ways, and one of the things that we knew we were going to be doing was this seminar. So I'm kind of here on behalf of the group as well, and you'll hear from them as well. But also we have created this kind of resource page on the Baptist Union website under resources and then public theology. And so we also really want the church to be talking about this and kind of acting on this. And so that was really great to be able to get those resources out. It's not exhaustive, and I've heard more resources even today listening along. So it's kind of great to have some of those things. But that's a little snapshot of a little bit about the group and what we do.
Fantastic. And the focus of our seminar today is looking at, I guess, how a climate crisis actually impacts our discipleship and how we actually live our lives as Christians. So we're really keen to hear what you have to share with us today. So everybody grab your iPads, pens, papers, get ready to take loads of notes, because I feel like we're all going to learn a thing or two. I'm going to hand over to you now, Laura.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I guess the kind of how I wanted to set out this talk, what I'm going to be speaking about today, is kind of split it into 3 parts. I'm going to speak at you for 10, 15 minutes. I'm then going to show a video from some of the other members of the public theology group. So you'll get a break from me and a few more faces. And then at the end, Lindsay's going to pop back on and we're going to have a bit of a chat and time for Q&A. So please do fire in your questions. It'll be great to answer them and to kind of dig deep into them. I feel like I've maybe got the best seminar slot in the whole of Canopy, because I've been watching along remotely, as everyone has been today, and we've had a message from Ruth Valerio, one of my colleagues, and it was great to really just ground ourselves in a bit of theology around creation care and climate justice to kind of set the tone for the conversation that we're going to have. So I feel that's ticked a box. I don't really have to go into a lot more of that, other than kind of reflecting on some of the things that she was saying and some of the things I've felt personally with my faith and my climate action. We've also then had a great seminar with Martin. I actually had the privilege of meeting him a couple of weeks ago, and it was just great to really hear his insights from somebody who works in industry and works in an industry that has a real role to play in the kind of climate sphere. It's really interesting to hear little insights from him about that world, because often, unless you work there, unless you're inside that circle, sometimes it's really hard to know what's going on. And so it was just amazing to meet with him and kind of chat with him and hear about his journey as an individual, but also through the Wood Group. So I feel like I've been set up really well to kind of give this talk to you. But I kind of just wanted to talk really briefly at the beginning just about, I think I'm looking at my notes here because this seminar is called How Does a Climate Crisis Impact Our Discipleship? And I think for me personally, I shared a little bit about my own personal journey to sustainability. But one of the things I guess never really played into it at the beginning was my faith, because I was learning about the planet and climate change, plastic, waste, sustainability at school. I was then learning about it at university. And so in my head, it was something that was outside of the church. It was something that I never heard preached in a really black and white way. You know, we learned about creation, we learned about Genesis, but we didn't really ever speak about climate change, the changing climate, climate action, climate justice. And so for me, actually, it was a bit of a journey just as an individual person. But in the last few years, one of the big things that has been great is seeing more Christian spaces talking about climate change, talking about the environment and how the way we live as a world, and particularly, I think it's important to know that, you know, I'm from Glasgow. And so as somebody who's from Glasgow, from Scotland, from the UK, a lot of the way I live my life has a really big impact on the planet. And it's great that as churches and youth groups, as organisations, we're talking a lot about this. And I do work for Tearfund, and it was actually a full circle moment for me, because I actually started to think about creation care and environmental justice at a Tearfund event. And now I work for them in this amazing role to do with COP26. And it's just, you know, really fantastic that I can kind of be sharing about that. But it's because we know that there's a couple of bits in the Bible, not really a couple of bits, really it's threaded throughout the whole thing. But we know that the Bible talks about caring for the planet that God has created for us, but also, you know, with us as part of that. We know that we've been instructed and have responsibility to look after the planet. And, I was really interested actually because there was a question in the last seminar that came up about, like, does it really all matter when, we're going to be leaving? Does it really matter when there's something different in our futures? But I think actually when we read Genesis, we know that God created everything and said it was good, and then at the end he actually turned around and said, no, it's very good. This planet, this creation, all of creation together is very good. And I think when we look around it now and we see some of the devastating impacts of climate change, we can't really say that it's looking very good at the moment. And I think there's first and foremost just a call for us as individuals, as Christians, to be living in a way that is in accordance with the planet and taking care of it. I also think there's something about this term climate justice, because climate change is not just an environmental issue. It's not just changing landscapes. Climate change is also impacting people. And it's not just impacting people in maybe the obvious ways that you might think of, because we know that wildfires and floods are changing landscapes, and meaning that lots of people around the world are having to move and adapt to that. But also climate change is exacerbating other justice issues. There's a great quote from Katharine Hayhoe, who is this Canadian Christian climate scientist, because she was talking about actually climate change is an issue to do with gender inequality, it's to do with refugee rights, it's to do with education. Climate change impacts everything, and we know that throughout the Bible, what is spoken about in black and white everywhere is justice and about living in a way that is loving our neighbour. And I think that also plays into how we live as individuals. In the book of Romans, we know that we've been called to live differently and offer up our lifestyles as a sacrifice to God. And I think it's really important. So I feel it's good. I feel I don't really need to go too much into that, because actually this morning we've heard from Ruth and Martin and we've really set ourselves up well. But I want to quickly jump on to COP26, which is coming up, a little bit about it, why it's important, and then I'll get into the kind of nitty-gritty of what it really looks like to live a little bit differently. But I think this is also a really important conversation right now, because this month, so in, I can't do the maths, 28 days, COP26, the United Nations Climate Summit, is coming to Glasgow. It's going to be sitting either side of the River Clyde, down the kind of Science Centre and SSE Hydro, that area. And this is going to be a 2-week-long climate conference where over 25,000 delegates from around the world are going to come together to discuss climate change, climate action, make commitments and make plans. And this is a huge thing actually for Glasgow. This is going to be the biggest meeting of world leaders the UK has ever seen, and it's coming to Glasgow. It's over 2 weeks, and in the middle of those 2 weeks, there is going to be a march, a protest, and there's numbers being thrown around to do with 100,000 people are potentially estimated to be coming down to say something. And so this big thing it's all bubbling, it's all happening, and it's about to happen at the end of this month. So this is a really important time that we engage in this, because it's going to come right to our doorstep, and we need to be getting ready with it. This is also really important because there's been a couple of things spoken about today already in the different seminars about the way that our world is changing. But there's one thing that we know for sure, and this is one of the big things that COP is going to be discussing, because scientists came together and did the maths and worked out that actually our planet has been warming, and they use a number since pre-industrial times. So currently the world has warmed about 1.2, 1.1 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. And maybe if you're from rainy Glasgow, you think actually that's quite a good thing. I don't mind a bit of warming, but actually what we do know is that as the planet has warmed, this has changed a lot about the way that our planet interacts, and the ecosystems and the systems, the weather systems. And we know that it's making a lot of problems like floods, wildfires, droughts. It's making them even worse. And this is putting vulnerable people at risk. And so scientists came together and said, if we reach 1.5 degrees of warming or above, it's going to be devastating. Now, we know that climate change is already devastating for communities and for people and the planet, but we know that this is why it's really important that we come together as a world to commit to keeping global warming to below this. The reason this is important and why I'm telling you this is because right now, in the run-up to COP, countries have been producing what they call NDCs, nationally determined contributions. And this is countries saying this is what we are going to do to help limit global warming, to fight climate change. And in the same way that scientists did this maths to work out this 1.5, they've also been doing the maths and realising that actually when you add up these NDCs, we know that we're going to shoot way far over 1.5, reaching 2, 3, even 4 degrees Celsius of warming, which would be catastrophic for the planet. And so it's important that we engage with this, that we are playing our part as individuals, as Christians. We're called to do this. So we're doing that as much as we can as individuals, but also pushing into our sphere of influence and encouraging other people around us to do the same. So I think, what do we need to do as Christians? Well, I think there's lots of things, because we can offer up our lives as a sacrifice. That's what that Romans passage in chapter 12 was talking about. But we can also live differently and use our sphere of influence to do some of this. I'm sure this will come up in the Q&A, so I'm probably not going to go into a big list of things that I've been doing to fight climate change as an individual, because I'm guessing that will come out in the questions. But even, just to paint a picture, right now I'm actually calling from my friend's house in Cambridge. I'm away for a weekend away with some of my friends, and packing for that trip, it's really interesting to see actually that some of the changes I've made are things like I brought along a shampoo bar and a conditioner bar and a bamboo toothbrush, because I'm trying to limit my plastic and my waste. I was packing my clothes into a bag that I got in a charity shop. I've got a t-shirt that I got in a charity shop, looking at my secondhand fashion, looking at the sustainable things that I wear, because I've been trying to live differently in a way that is in accordance with our call for creation care and creating a more sustainable future. We've been eating a lot of lovely food while we're here, and I've been eating lots of lovely vegan options, because I'm trying to think about my food and how I can eat in a way that is sustainable for the planet. And all of these things kind of paint a picture, which is, this is what it looks like to live differently for climate. But also, I've been trying to take my education, the stuff that I learned at university, my skills, the gifts that God has given each of us as individuals, and I'm trying to use them in a way that can help further the climate movement. And so that's things like I've been doing a regular slot on BBC Radio Scotland for 20 minutes, talking about the things we can all do as individuals to be more sustainable, trying to broadcast that out to more people to encourage behaviour change and people really engaging in the sustainability. I've been using my social media to talk about issues that are important, to share petitions that I think are really important for our government to be looking at, whether it's to do with plastic or carbon or whatever it might be. I've been chatting to my friends. One of the best things, Catherine Hayhoe, this scientist, you can tell I'm a bit of a fan, she did an amazing TED talk. And in it she said, actually the most important thing we can do for climate change is talk about it. And that's what I do. I try and bring it up. I try and talk to my friends about it, my family, my colleagues at work, and try and use my sphere of influence. I'm sure we'll get into more specifics. And if you've got a burning question about what shampoo bar I use, it's from Lush. There you go, because that's always a question that comes up. I'll give you that one for free. But one of the things I want to do before we dive into a Q&A session is actually, as an individual, I've come from this from an academic point of view. This is my passion. This is my thing. I absolutely love talking about environmental issues and trying to do some of this activism. But we all come from different backgrounds, and I want to reflect that and show that actually we need lots of people doing lots of different things in their different spheres of influence to fight climate change. And so I now have a video, and this is the point where you are going to meet some more faces. It's not everyone, but it's some more faces from the Public Theology group. And I'm going to pass over just to the video now for you to have a look at that. And I hope you enjoy hearing a little bit of what it means for them as an individual to be caring for creation.
Hello, I'm Laura Gilmore, and I'm a member of the Public Theology group. I think that any actions we take regarding environmental issues should begin by looking at Scripture and studying what God says about his creation. It's in that way that we can look at the different ways in which our responsibility for creation care intersects with our personal faith. I know from experience that the whole issue of climate change can sometimes feel a little daunting. And with an overload of information, it can be hard for us to work out what we can do about it. I've found that fostering a connection to God through his creation means that I can take individual and collective actions which are spirit-led and are firmly rooted in my faith and ongoing discipleship. For me, that means growing my own fruit and vegetables, and whilst doing so, thanking God for his provision. It helps me remember our utter dependence on him, from the rain that he sends to the nourishment that he gives us, both physically and spiritually. I spend as much time as I can outdoors, often swimming in the local loch, and I find that the silence out on the water helps me pray and meditate on whatever God has placed on my heart at that moment. It's through fostering that connection to God in this way which helps me discern what other actions I might take in the face of climate change. Actions which have a wider impact beyond my own individual sphere of influence. Things such as lobbying for wider systemic change, or encouraging those in power to face up to the seriousness of the situation. But all this begins with that close connection and the integration of creation care into our everyday discipleship, so that our faith in the Creator God informs our individual response.
I'm Brian Miller, and I'm a member of the Public Theology Group. It's my conviction that the approach that we take to engaging in climate change issues needs to be aligned with the interests of the most disadvantaged communities. A way in which I have set out to contribute to that is in advocacy work with NGOs to engage people in a more collaborative approach to tackling climate change adaptation. We have been aware of an impasse for many years between rich and poor nations, debating who should pay for what and who was responsible for what. I think we need to move on from that to a recognition that we all share the challenge and that a collective approach is needed in order to identify the most effective ways that we can tackle that together. Also within my role in higher education, I have been keen to promote a clear understanding of the effect of energy use on the development of the poorer nations of the world. It's particularly important to recognise that an overly aggressive approach to tackling the removal of fossil fuel-based energy might just lead to a spiking of prices of energy that could lead to pricing poorer nations out of energy altogether and lead to reinforcing the poverty gap and their position of disadvantage. I think at the end of the day, my faith leads me to believe that we must adopt an approach to changes that leads to justice rather than simply based on an ideological view.
My name's Andrew McCallum and I'm part of the Public Theology Group. I've recently started a new job working for a debt counselling charity, and so I've started thinking about climate change more in terms of caring for the world's poorest. In Matthew 25, we hear Jesus say explicitly that when we care for the overlooked and the ignored, the poor and the desperate, we are caring for Jesus in disguise. Now we know that climate change is set to hit the world's poorest the hardest. So when we care for our climate, when we care for our world, we care for the world's poorest, we care for Jesus. One of my New Year's resolutions this year was to try and think about how I can live a more environmentally friendly and sustainable life. Now at first it just felt really overwhelming and difficult and I didn't really know where to begin. But I decided that each month I would do at least one thing to try and move in that direction. Which is kind of why I'm still talking about my New Year's resolutions in October. I feel like it's went alright. One thing that I've done is that I've switched out my toothpaste and my shampoos and started getting them in a more environmentally friendly recyclable box instead of in plastic packaging. Switched out my milk and got that delivered in a glass bottle. I've tried to walk, to cycle and to get public transport instead of getting the car. And currently at the moment I'm trying to rally the people in my workplace, the council and my flatmate to try and start a compost to dispose of our food waste more responsibly. Zechariah 4 verse 10 says, "Do not despise the day of the small beginnings." I think sometimes we think about climate justice and it feels overwhelming. Sometimes we look to the world leaders, the CEOs, the politicians, influencers, and we should think that they should be the ones making the changes, and we should expect change from them. But actually, in the desert, God asks Moses, what is in your hand? God's interested in what's in our hand. I think our journey of discipleship, in terms of looking after our climate, should really begin with asking ourselves, what's in our hand? What can we control? What small change or humble beginning can I start with today?
Hello, my name is Graham Bell and I'm the chair of the Public Theology Group. I hope you're enjoying today's seminar, and a big thanks to Laura for using her knowledge and expertise in drawing it all together for us. As I reflect on my own journey of discipleship in regard to environmental issues, then I would have to admit to my great shame that maybe 20 or so years ago, I would have probably fallen within that camp of thinking, why worry too much about what happens to our world? For after all, doesn't the Bible say that God will one day come and destroy it anyway and begin again? Well, thankfully, my thinking has developed and changed an awful lot since those days. And I've come to realise that this world as we know it still plays a major part in the kingdom which is to come. And while there may be newness, there will still be a continuity as well as a discontinuity with the world we have right now. At the same time, I've come to appreciate, I think, in a whole new way, that if God really made this world as we believe he did, then that means that everything we see round about us in the natural realm of created order bears something of his fingerprints, something of his love, something of his presence and his nearness. And therefore, because we love him and worship him, we really ought to look after that which he has so lovingly made for us. And so, as a family, we do many of the things which I'm sure many people are being encouraged to do nowadays, in terms of recycling and composting, cutting down our fresh water usage and energy supplies, cutting down on unnecessary journeys, and all the other things which we know now that we really have to do. But at the same time, I would have to admit to a degree of frustration in not being able to do as much as I would want to do. Let me give you two examples. A number of years ago, we bought a new house, and having no gas supply, we needed to install a new central heating system, and we were very keen in looking at green options, such as a biomass boiler or a ground source heat system or whatever. But after many months, we eventually had to hoist the white flag of surrender because things were either just going to be too impractical or too costly for us. And so we ended up opting for an oil-based central heating system, which we really didn't want to do. Or more recently, I wanted to change my car and needed an estate car because I have two large dogs. And again, wanted to look at more greener options in terms of electric or hybrid. But once more, either the cars out there were not practical or they were just cost prohibitive for us at that time. And once more reluctantly, I opted for another diesel. But in these examples, I wanted to do more, but just found that I was unable to at this time. I wonder what your experiences have been.
It's great to be able to share this talk actually with the other people here on the Public Theology Group. I hope that was helpful to kind of paint a little bit of a picture around what it looks like as individuals, as one person, as a family, as someone with a background in energy, or someone working with a charity or a minister, whoever. It's really good to kind of see that mosaic of what people are trying to do, but also talk about the reality of what it looks like, the struggles, the things that we are frustrated by, the complexities behind what it means to live a more sustainable lifestyle. I know that for me, it has been a journey over many years to getting to the point where I am today. Is my life completely and utterly sustainable, carbon free and plastic free? No, of course not, but I'm trying and I'm making steps towards that. And actually every step that I take in the direction that is more sustainable is better, and it's bringing people along with me. And I just think that's really important. But also, I think with COP coming up, there's also ways that we can engage, not just in lifestyle action, but also being there. So I think it was mentioned, Martin sort of dropped it into his session, that I will be at COP26 through my work with Tearfund. I have what's called a Blue Zone Pass, which means I'm an official observer to all that's going on there. And I know that one of the big things that we're doing at Tearfund, but I know a lot of other organisations are doing, is trying to encourage Christians to engage with this, to talk about it, to pray for it, to pray for climate, to pray for COP, for world leaders. And I think that's really, really important that we do that. And I want to just remind you again that as a group, as the Public Theology Group, we have created these resources for you to go and take away. Some of them are Christian resources, might be books or articles, or I think Ruth mentioned a few of the resources that are on there as well, things like the Catherine Hayhoe Tearfund, Bible study videos, the Burning Down the House research, lots of other amazing resources. Please do go and check them out and see how you could bring this into your church, bring this into your individual discipleship journey. But I think what I'd love to do now is, I think Lindsay's going to pop back on magically, and we're going to have a bit of a Q&A. I can see there's been a few comments coming through. So Lindsay, I don't know if you want to launch into this with a question, and I'll hopefully just be able to provide some great answers.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. That was so informative, and it's so interesting just finding out from different voices about what we can actually start to be thinking about. Like, I know I find it personally really challenging. So what I would encourage you all to do is, if you do have questions or comments or things that you'd like Laura to delve into a bit deeper, or things that you maybe are just feeling a bit clueless about, we have an expert with us today. So do pop some questions into the comments section on our YouTube stream here. So we've got a few great questions in. I'll start with the first one from John, actually. So John's asking, basically, you've spoken before about how we can be using our pension investments to influence companies to turn the tanker faster. But how do we actually go about doing this?
Yeah, this is great. It's funny. I feel my journey as an individual, it started with like really obvious things, thinking about plastic and waste. But as I've journeyed on throughout time, I've sort of been like, oh, what other things can I maybe look at and try and, make more sustainable? And pensions and money fall under the boring activism section in my brain, because it's things that are dire. I can't stand doing life admin. But it was really interesting. There is a great organisation that I'm going to shout out, and they're called Make My Money Matter, Make My Money Matter. And they've been doing so much around pensions and ethical pensions and how we can be more sustainable, because actually one of the biggest pots of money in our lives happens to be our pensions. I don't think about mine enough. Oh my goodness, I'm too young to be thinking about that. But actually, it's a big pot of money that is on our behalf being invested in, a lot of the time, fossil fuels, sometimes other unethical practices like tobacco, and sometimes arms trading. There's real issues with pensions. But one of the great things that Make My Money Matter is doing is helping to dissect. There we go, it's on screen, amazing, like magic. It is helping dissect the language around your pension and really give advice. So whether you are a freelancer, whether you work in an organisation that has like a quite big pension strategy, it's a really great place to go to and kind of start to do that. And it helps you deal with that on your own, or helps you engage with your organisation, that your employer, to say, I'm really interested in what it looks like to have a more ethical pension. What are my options? And so I'd highly recommend checking them out, because everyone's pensions will be unique to them. But this is a great place to go and just really get some information from. So Make My Money Matter. That would be a shout out for them.
That's great. Thank you so much. We will definitely all be checking out that link. We've got another question in from Martin Link. Hi, Martin. He's wondering, how can we help our young people and our church youth group leaders become more climate aware? How do we actually raise awareness within our churches and our young people?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think Martin kind of spoke about this in his seminar, actually, that there was this piece of research done between Tearfund. I'm just a big shout out for all the Tearfund things I know about, but it was the Tearfund and Youthscape, who are kind of Christian youth organisation, and they were looking at, it's called Burning Down the House. It's linked in our resources page if anyone goes to that. And they did this research around, the fact that young people care, and we as a church need to be talking about this, discussing it, and taking action. But that is exactly what you said. There is a bit of a gap, because that gap is, but what if a youth worker doesn't know a lot about climate change? How do we get them equipped, and how do we do that? Organisations like Tearfund have whole teams dedicated. So even just a shout out to the Tearfund Scotland team. Get in touch if you're interested in doing some stuff with your youth group. And there's lots of resources to help run sessions to kind of talk about this. But I was also on a really interesting course. So Keep Scotland Beautiful, so not a Christian organisation, but Keep Scotland Beautiful ran a youth worker training programme, and it was under the carbon literacy programme. So this is something I did at university, but actually they've been putting them on in recent years, and it was a free course for any youth worker or anyone who works with young people to go on. And it was actually, as it kind of says in the tin, it was to help make people literate in the language of climate. So it was both understanding the science, but also understanding how we can have an impact. And so I think what I would suggest is checking out organisations like that. So Keep Scotland Beautiful. I know that they had an overwhelming response to people wanting to do it. And so I think they're putting on more and more. I think there actually might be one starting this month. So if you're someone who just wants to go and learn the kind of secular, just the climate bit, that would be a great place. But also do check out organisations like Tearfund, who have got youth resources and actions and everything that you can take, because I think young people are being taught about this, and they know more than we do often, and they're the ones who it's their future as much as it is ours. And I think it's really important that we engage with young people, but also ask them what we can do to help them in any actions that we want to do. And I think with COP26 coming up, there's maybe an opportunity for young people to do something in the church around that. So yeah, that would be a couple of places to go and have a look at.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really important question, because I think young people really mirror what they see going on around them, and they mirror what they see adults doing. And so I think if we can actually inform ourselves as parents, as educators, as youth group leaders, that's where the sphere of influence really has a high potential for impact. We have another question here, which is a really interesting one. Is a more sustainable lifestyle achievable for someone on a lower income, or is it just for the relatively wealthy?
Great. No, and this is really important, because I think one thing that has happened, especially as climate and sustainability has become more popular, maybe even more trendy, we've seen a lot of it. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people kind of jumping to it and making it out to be a lifestyle, and a lot of it isn't accessible. We heard Graham talking about an electric car and a ground source heat pump, and although there are lots of grants, I've also seen some people putting some things about grants that are available for this. Often there are things that aren't accessible. But I guess maybe just to paint a bit of a picture, and it's not the best one, but it's my lived experience, which is I started all of this as a student. So I was at university on a bit more of a budget than I am now as someone who is employed and who earns, a wage. But actually, I started this when I was a lot more conscious about my money. And one of the things I was really aware of was actually when I was going to buy more sustainable things, I did find that they cost a bit more, or sometimes I was put off because it was a new thing and I wasn't actually sure if I was going to like it or be able to use it. And so it's also off-putting. But one of the things I've learned about sustainability is it's about less in general, pretty much all the time. It's not about buying new fancy gadgets and gizmos and all of it. It's actually just often about buying less. So whether that is saving food waste by not bulk buying all your food and then letting it go to waste in the back of your fridge, it's about buying less fashion alongside secondhand and more sustainable materials. It's just about less stuff. One of the big things I did this year is I deleted my Amazon account. I know some people that seems like maybe impossible, but I was like, if I just don't have it, I just won't buy anything. And actually, I've done absolutely fine without it. And so a lot of the time it's about these things. And I think there are some things like for example, a shampoo bar, it's like £6, but I found it lasts me 6 months. And so sometimes you might think, oh, that's quite a big upfront cost, which of course is a barrier to many people. But also it's sometimes about looking and saying, well, actually, am I saving money in other places? Or maybe over time, this will save me money. Even really basic things like taking your own cup to a cafe and you often, I got a 25p discount yesterday. And so I think it's, really important to have that. But I guess the one thing we need to do is be continually bringing on everyone. Everyone needs to be able to access this. And I think that's why there's more organisations now helping people think about how to be more sustainable in a finance-friendly way. And I think that's really key. And I think Andrew sort of touched upon that as well. But I think it's also probably important to say that actually, as somebody who isn't necessarily, in terms of my personal financial position, I'm the one contributing to climate change more than I am being impacted by it. And so often when we look at areas maybe within Scotland or around the world, actually it is poorer communities who aren't contributing to it. They already live more sustainable lifestyles. It's not them that are ordering thousands of things off Amazon every single year or flying around the UK multiple times every year. And so I think we need to kind of take a step back. But it's a really intricate one. So I've found that over the last few years, I've saved a lot of money living a more sustainable lifestyle, but often that's just because I'm buying less stuff. And I think that's, really key to do that. But I also appreciate that there are things that we need to do to make sustainable options more affordable. And things like these grants are the kind of things that we need to see more of to help everyone along.
Wow, fantastic. It's a really, it's a curious one, isn't it? Because I think a huge part of it for people is actually starting to get more familiar with the more sustainable products and integrating them more into everyday life. So for example, bars of shampoo, if you go and do your shopping in the supermarket, you don't really have access to fresh bars of shampoo. Now you mentioned you went to Lush for yours earlier on. Excellent top tip there. But that's the thing, I think if we can start actually making these things more familiar to people, then it'll actually become a more normal part of our decision making on a daily basis. Some great questions coming in here. One of them that kind of follows on from that, I guess, and follows on from what you were saying earlier is from Ewan Johnson. He's asking, how do we respond to the climate emergency as church communities?
I mean, I think we need to talk about it. I think we need to preach on it. I think we need to bring it into the heart of what our churches do. I think if you've ever moved city or moved country or anything, and when you're on the hunt for a church, there's things that you look for. You're like, oh, does this church have X, Y, and Z? Do they have groups that interest me? What are they engaging with in their local community? I think one of the biggest questions now in my mind is, and what are they doing for the environment? How are they caring for creation? How is that integral to the mission of that church? So I think we need to bring it right into the heart of it. I think we need to pray about the climate, intercede. We need to pray for COP, world leaders, and that needs to become more normal. I think we need to be doing things with our youth groups. I think we need to do things in our local community spaces. And to give a few, I guess, more shout outs to places that churches can go to. So I've already mentioned a few, but you've got things like Eco Congregation Scotland is a great way to talk about what your church could do. That's a place where you can learn a bit more. Ruth mentioned this earlier, but one of the resources you'll find on our website, I'm a broken record talking about that website, I'm just glad it's up, is the Climate Emergency Toolkit, which helps your church declare a climate emergency like Scotland did a couple of years ago, like councils have been doing and other countries have been doing. Because as a church, you might potentially have hundreds of members. That's hundreds of people in your community. You can make a statement by saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to declare this climate emergency. We're going to work towards it. And also take action as individuals. We should be talking about the fact that, because also what's linked with climate change is also just living a life that is more closer to what God has intended for us. It's about less stuff. It's about more time with His Word and time together. So I think there's all these kind of important things that churches can be doing, and I think that's the kind of important response. But also, we wouldn't be talking about, the fact that we're talking about this now today shows that there has been a bit of a shift. Like Canopy's put on 3 different things today, all to talk about climate change. And even though COP is coming up, I think it's still important that even past COP, we still do that. We still talk about it just because COP might finish. So I think that's really important to be doing.
Absolutely, that's great. And there's a little link there to the resources section again on the Baptist Union website. And you'll find all of the content and the details of the websites mentioned today. We'll pop that all on there so that you can access it afterwards and even share it with your churches, put it on your social media, and share the session around as well. I think that's one way if we can get the conversations going about it. It really can have a big impact. We'll take another question. We've got one here. So this is a great question. There's so many great questions coming in. Not everyone would regard themselves as an influencer, or they maybe just don't have the privilege to actually have an audience, but they may care really deeply about all of these issues. So how can we all widen out our impact to the max?
I love that, because actually I think the term influencer has now been taken because there is now a thing which is an influencer. You know, people talk about social media influencers, and so I think it's important to say, well, actually, what is influence? Because we all have it. We all are influencers in our own right, and actually everyone's sphere of influence is different. You know, there's even just funny things. You might think, you know, how can I have an impact as an individual? Well, COP's coming to Glasgow this month, and Alok Sharma is the UK COP president, so he's kind of leading the whole thing, hosting it, and he's been doing lots of work trying to encourage countries to make, you know, big decisions and contributions towards climate change. One of the really funny things is he actually kind of came out with a statement, I think it was a couple of years ago now, or maybe it was last year, time stands still in pandemic, but he said that his family has decided to go vegetarian because his daughter persuaded him, I guess, but was talking about the fact that she really cared about the planet, and that was something that she thought they should do to be more sustainable. And I thought that's really funny, because here's Alok Sharma, you know, one of the most powerful COP people trying to do all these deals with world leaders, and one of the most influential people in his life is his daughter. And you think, actually, we all sit in spaces with other people who we can influence, even if we don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, or maybe we're not on the executive board of a company or whatever. We actually all have the ear of someone else. We can talk about this. That's Catherine Hale's quote again, talking about it. And so as individuals, we sit in different spaces. You could be the person to talk to your church leader about doing the Tearfund COP26 church service on the 7th of November. You could have that conversation to get that played on it. You could be the one to email your council, like Andrew's doing, to try and get composting bins. You know, we can all be those people to try and shape and influence around us. And I think a lot of the time it's great, it's amazing to change individual things, lifestyle actions, you know, cutting out our waste and our plastic. But it's pointless if we don't then try and bring people along with us. And it can just be your household, it could be who you work with. And I think that's really important, because, you know, we've just had Martin do a seminar. You know, Martin is an individual and he can make lifestyle changes the same as I can, but he's also in a different position to I am in an industry that needs change. So he's sitting in an influence position there. So I think it's important to kind of see that we're all unique and we have these different things, but we can have a lot of impact even if we don't think we can. And that's part of the reason it's important to be doing this, to be encouraging people to talk about it.
I love that. And it actually reminded me of when one of my boys was at nursery and he came home and they'd been doing a focus on fair trade and sustainable products at nursery. Yeah. So age 4, his nursery homework was, let's go to the shops and only buy sustainable and fair trade products. And it was a real challenge, actually. It was like a bit of an eye-opener, and it really made us reassess how we actually, you know, buy our shopping and how we make our decisions around what we choose to bring into the house. Another great question from John is, how do we make sure that our recycling is then actually recyclable? Because obviously everyone's trying to cut back on plastic. We've all got our multiple colours of recycling bins, but how do we actually make sure that our recycling is recyclable?
Oh, do you know, I hate recycling. I'm not a fan of recycling, and I think it's because recycling is often, it's posed as the answer. People say, oh, but it's fine, I recycle, or oh, it's great because it's recyclable, and actually it's nonsense. And I'll go into my rant for a bit about recycling, because number one, things are not actually recycled pretty much. So metal and glass are the two things that can kind of be recycled indefinitely. So they are good, they get the Less Waste Laura thumbs up. But plastic and paper, which are two of the most common materials that we use, especially plastic, they're not recycled, they're downcycled. So if you put in a plastic bottle to be recycled, a plastic bottle is not coming out the other side. It'll come out as polyester fibres for carpet. Do you know, we're not getting this endless loop that we think we are. And it's really obvious actually when you look at it, because you think anything you buy in the shops, bottles of juice or bottles of cleaning products, what do you do with that? Oh, you recycle it, and then you go and buy it again. But the stuff you bought is not made from recycled materials. So it's not this perfect loop that we think about. Also, recycling is really inefficient. A lot of the time that's our fault. So I've got a friend who works in a recycling centre, and it's been eye-opening hearing her stories, because actually when we get our recycling wrong, so we put the wrong things in the wrong bins, we don't clean them out and it's all contaminated, recycling collection facilities will just take a look in and go, nah, that's not worth our time sorting out, just chuck it all into landfill, because it's really inefficient to be sorting things out, especially when it's all wrong, and then ending up with a lot of waste. So actually it's really important that we do that. And so my question about, how do we make sure we're recycling things? Well, I would always say it's about less waste rather than what can I recycle. And I drill that into people, because I'm like, there's no point in all of us having lots of plastic, even if it can be recycled, because it is so detrimental to the planet that we keep consuming and producing at the rate we are. So I would always say, try and get things in glass or metal, and then paper, so in that order, or completely packaging free. So I try and just produce less waste rather than things in recycled materials. But I'll give you another place that you can go and look at. So Zero Waste Scotland have just launched a phenomenal tool. And it is, because you know how normally you're like, oh, I'll have to go and find my council website and find out what can be recycled. And it's a bit of a faff, because councils have different websites and it's all a bit confusing. Zero Waste Scotland have just launched last month a new recycling website where you can go and see anywhere in Scotland what is recycled really easily. So I can't remember what it's called. It's called something like Recycling Toolkit or something like that. But Zero Waste Scotland Recycling Sorter. So you go onto their website, you put in your postcode. So everyone goes to the same website, you put in your postcode, and then it goes and it brings up what you can recycle. And it says what you can recycle, what bin it goes into, and what you can't recycle. Amazing. And they are working to make it more efficient and make it better. So also, if there's something that you don't know if you can recycle or not and it's not on the website, email them and say, maybe this is worth putting on the website because I'm not sure where to put it. But that's a great thing. So Zero Waste Scotland and their new recycling tool online, it's great. But I hate recycling, and I would always say less waste over recycling.
That was an excellent rant. Very concise.
I do it all the time.
That is really interesting. See, quick specific question then. Finished with a jar of Nutella, how much do you have to clean it out? Do you need to separate the lid from the jar, given that they're both going into the plastics and glass recycling bin? And is there a place we can fill up our Nutella, for example?
I don't know if there's Nutella refill stations, but you could try and make your own. That might be something fun. So you could roast some hazelnuts, put some cocoa powder in it, and blitz it all up. Might be fun, might be rubbish, but yeah, I think I would always try and say reuse it if you can. But if not, if it's all going in the same bin, just put it in the same bin. That'll be fine. You'll know, and this tool will hopefully advise us as well about how to do that.
Fantastic. Now, another question. We've got a few minutes left, so let me just see how quickly we can batter through these, because there's still some great ones. Okay, how can we use our concern for climate change to actually share the gospel of Jesus?
Great question. I mean, even just a really obvious one. I do lots of work outside of the Christian space talking about climate and environmental issues. And when people ask me, why do you care? That's an opportunity to share about my faith, to share about the Bible, to share about the word, to share about the gospel. Simple. And actually, when we don't have Christians in spaces, we never have that chance to share that good news. And, I think that's just something that's really important. And actually, I think that's a voice that needs to be in different places. So that would be my short and sweet answer for that one.
Fantastic. A question from Peter and Natalie Atkins. Is it time for catastrophe-ready forms of discipleship?
I don't really know what that means, but it sounds like a good thing. I mean, yes. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm really keen, we really do need to speak about this as an urgent issue, because people, they're not going to be impacted in 10 years. They're being impacted today. They were impacted last year. And so I think it's important that we speak with urgency, but we also speak about hope in Jesus, hope in our faith, but we bring that in. But I do think we need to be ramping up our discipleship in general, not just to do with climate, but also with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And I'm just going to spin through these and see if we've got time for one more question.
The good thing is I publicly exist online as Less Waste Laura, so it's easy to find me if you do have a burning question that isn't answered. I'm always happy to repeat any answers for you or go on another rant.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, I think we'll put a pin in the questions there. And just finish up with a massive thank you to you, Laura, for coming on today and sharing all of your pearls of wisdom and experience with us. I know for myself, it's been incredibly insightful. And I know that for everybody tuning in, there's been great engagement here with all the questions. Our seminar is going to be posted on our YouTube channel, so you can download it, rewatch it at any time, share it amongst your social media contacts. We all have a voice of influence, and that's one small way that we can use it. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Laura, you've been an absolute delight, and yeah, we look forward to hearing more from you. And if anybody was listening to Radio 1 this week, you might have caught Laura 60 Seconds with Greg James on the Radio 1 breakfast show. Hi.
I will. It's great, but yeah, honestly, if people are wanting to know more and follow along, please do, like, on social media, come and like follow me or follow like Tearfund, and you'll see a lot of like the COP stuff that we are doing. And so, like, just get engaged, ask questions. That's the best that we can do.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in today. Remember to join us tomorrow morning. We've got our final Canopy morning gathering at 10:30. We're going to be live streaming that on YouTube. So I know that there's already thousands of you signed up in churches across Scotland. And we cannot wait to see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you all so much. Bye.